One of the greatest mysteries of our faith is how God's sovereignty, meaning he's always in control and knows everything, and human free will, which means we get to make choices, how these two coexist. I mean, if God is truly in control, then do our choices even matter? And if we really have free will, does that mean that we can somehow interfere with God's plan? And what I'm learning is we have to live somewhere in this dynamic tension. Scripture says that actually both are true, that God reigns and is supreme over everything, yet he has given us real choices with real consequences. The Bible is clear that God rules over history. There's nothing that happens outside of his will. Isaiah 46:9-10 declares, I am God and there is no other. I declare the end from the beginning. My counsel shall stand and I will accomplish my purpose. And Proverbs 16:9 says, yeah, it's true that the heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps. See, God is not some passive observer. He is actively working all things to bring about his purpose. That's his sovereignty. At the same time, Scripture affirms that we are not puppets, that we make real choices that have real consequences. In Deuteronomy 30, he says, I have set before you life and death, blessing and curses. Now choose. There it is. Choose life. Jesus himself expresses sorrow over Jerusalem's rejection in Matthew 23:37, saying, I long to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing. There's the choice again. His desire was for them to turn to him, yet they rejected him, proving that human choice really does matter. Okay, so then how do these two things work together? Well, perhaps the best example of this mystery is found in Genesis 50:20, where Joseph tells his brothers after they've sold him into slavery, he's been a slave, it looks really bad, it looks like a lot of bad choices. He says, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. So their choices were sinful and real, yet God wove them into his plan to save many lives. This is that dynamic tension. And of course, there's Jesus, who is crucified by the choices of sinful men, yet God's sovereign plan was to use that for salvation. So how do you live in this tension? Well, I have learned in my life that I've got to believe that God's plan is sovereign, and that when I pray, I'm not trying to manipulate him or change his mind. I'm trying to align my will, my mind with his perfect plan. And then I've also got to make wise, God-honoring choices. My choices do matter. They have consequences. So I've got to make choices that lead and submit themselves to the sovereignty of God. And then I got to pray boldly, believing that God is in everything. And when I pray, he hears me and gives me the power to make good choices to fulfill his plan in my life. And when we do that, we live in this beautiful tension. And that is a stepping stone to being who God created you to be.